Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Build Different Finance. We're glad you're here. Today, we're going to be diving into the question that challenges the standard path most people follow when the need arises to obtain or increase income. Are you open to work? Are you open for business? So, welcome back. Roger Labuguen, he's joining us again today, which is awesome. He's the entrepreneur and CEO of 300 Leadership Development. Thanks for being here today, Roger.
Thanks for having me, Shanna.
Glad to see you. It's awesome. So we didn't talk about this too much last time. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just yourself and how you got into the financial industry.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that question. Um, well, a little bit about my background. Growing up, I was raised by two immigrant parents, worked multiple jobs, so I didn't see them very much growing up. My dad was also a service member, so he was deployed here and there, and I just remembered seeing kids with family members like parents at games, parents at graduations, and a lot of times I miss that. And I always wondered like, what would my life look like if my parents were there more often and
Mhm.
whatnot. Not to say that was a bad thing because it taught me a lot about being independent growing up and something I realized a lot of these parents had businesses. They would either work from home or they had some freedom. And so when I married my beautiful wife, she had the entrepreneurial bug. I've seen my parents work 2 to 3 jobs. So in turn, I did the same thing. I worked 2 jobs as a respiratory therapist, two different hospitals, working 60 to 70 hours a week. But my wife, she always wanted to be a CEO, always wanted to run her own business. So how I caught it was she already had it. So when she decided, you know what, I want to start businesses, she started like a a lot of different businesses. She did like a scrapbook making business. She had a where she would sit down with clients and help them with their finances, help them get out of debt, and they would just pay per session and whatnot. Um, but eventually we landed in financial services, and this was always been her dream job to help people financially get out of debt, buy homes, build wealth. So she started this business first, and she made quite a lot of money in just a few months. And I thought to myself, like, well, how are you able to make so much money in your part-time spare time raising kids while I'm slaving away, working 60 to 70 hours a week, making maybe a third of what she's making? So I thought to myself, well, what if I put in the same amount of effort and work into our business? What would that look like? So
Mm.
cut the cord, I cut I would say umbilical cord, or I jumped ship and I fired my boss and 20, I believe that was 2018, 2019, and haven't looked back since. And it's been awesome. It's been incredible. And freedom is not free. You definitely have to work for it. You got to work hard for it, but it is definitely worth it.
That's amazing. I'm kind of like your wife. I have the bug, and my husband's kind of like you. We're mostly go to school and we're trained to kind of be worker bees. So being an
hmm
entrepreneur is something completely different. So wow, I love that she pulled you along and you seem to be doing well. You're so great at it. Kind of a natural, right? So people really often talk about, the 9 to 5, the employment trap. What do you think they mean by that?
That's a great question. Nearing the end of my employment at the hospital, I remember a coworker saying to me, I have 5 years left, right? And then a year later, he would tell me, I have four, or I have 3 years. And I just thought to myself, who talks like that?
Mm.
It's usually people who are serving a sentence, serving a sentence. And
Yeah.
we ask this question all the time. Hey, what do you do in your free time? And why do we call it free time? Because the other time is not ours.
Mm.
So if
Mhm.
it's not ours, whose is it?
Right.
Someone bought our time. I have this saying that what came first, the employee or the entrepreneur? You
Mm.
know,
Good question.
and because someone took a risk, I had a job, meaning someone decided to open up a hospital, and now I had a job. But if you're never willing to take a risk, you'll always have a job, right? So the entrepreneur had to create something in order for an employee to have a job, or else they're not going to get paid. An employee will not create that that business, right? Someone had to start it off. So when I talk about when you hear the employment trap, it's easy to get lulled into comfortability. It's easy to get lulled into a certain lifestyle, and your income will determine what kind of place you'll live in, what kind of food you'll eat, what kind of people you'll be around. I mean, it really does limit you when it comes to, what God can actually do with your life. So, employment is kind of like you have a salary cap, right? You're not going to make more than your position allows. With entrepreneur, there is no salary cap, right? You can make as little as you want. You
Mhm.
can make as much as you want. The sky's the limit. And so that's what I think about when I hear about the employment trap, that there are limits
Mhm.
because you are limited by the time you had or limited by the income you can make.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that people get used to, clocking in, clocking out, that security, those jobs
Mhm.
are going to be there, right? But these days you can't really say that's true, right? We never know when our security is going to be um, up for grabs, right? And so I think a lot
Yeah.
of people think about jobs and they think about, oh, I have my security, right? I can go to,
Mm.
Starbucks down the road. It's going to be there. It's not going to go anywhere. But there's trade-offs. So what do you think
Right.
some of those trade-offs are? Security versus the trade-off of what?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Um, when I talk to people, talk to folks who have a job or even have a business, we talk about benefits, right? As an employee, you will get benefits, right? And people who get benefits, there's a trade-off. Hey, are you willing to give up your time, your energy, and effort, right? In a trade-off for benefits, whether it be healthcare coverage, some vision, some
Right.
dental, to some life insurance, or and whatnot. Now that gives you security. And Tony Robbins has six human needs, right?
Mm,
Top two are certainty and uncertainty. So, certainty, people are always looking for like, well, I'm living in fear or living in, lack. So my mindset's thinking like, if I do this today, then I will get paid in 2 weeks. So you'll get paid
right.
every 2 weeks. So you're just wired to think that way, right?
Mhm.
Now here's the risk. The average American will work, I believe it's 80 to 90,000 hours in their life, right?
Wow.
So 80 to 90,000. So let's say you start working at 2021 and then you work till 65. The average American will work a lot of years, right? And you can be trading time for money that entire time. So I think one of the biggest risks is not taking a risk at all, right? What if you
Mm,
took 10,000 of those hours and built something, built a business that can free you so that the rest of the 70, 60,000 hours are entirely yours, right? So would you rather work 80 to 90,000 hours or work 10,000 to 20,000 hours building something so that you can be free for the rest of those hours?
yeah.
Many people, like for me, I became close to my dad when he retired. And the reason why I came close to my dad when he retired is because he was always working. But what if you were present as a father? What
Mm,
if you're present as a dad or a mom during those formidable years where they're growing up, they're playing soccer and they're going to karate school
yeah.
and they're going to school and you're dropping them off and you're picking them up. What if you were there because you built something? You built a business that runs on its own. So when I think about trade-offs, I'm willing to front load a little bit more effort in the beginning to build something so I can be free the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that because I was just reading this article about the different generations, and I was
Mhm.
the Generation X, also called the latchkey kid, right? Because your parents
Mm.
worked so much. You were home. And I got to thinking about it. 9, 10 years old, me and my cousin, we were home. And I was like, would I let my kids do that? No way. And so I think that there are those trade-offs, you don't get to see
Mhm.
your kids. You don't get to, even if you're working, right? We all have passions. We want to do our thing. But if you have that time to spend with your family and go on a trip. It's kind of amazing that you get to do that. So you mentioned entrepreneurship, right? There are risks, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of people think about being an entrepreneur. It's really exciting, but it can
Mhm.
be risky. It can be challenging.
Right.
What would you say some of the real challenges are?
Yes, yeah, great question. So when it comes to risk, you have to understand that everything carries a risk, right?
Mhm.
So let's say you go the traditional route, going to college and getting a job. You're spending 4 years at a college developing yourself, getting a degree so you can eventually be someone who has credibility, someone who has the credentials to get a certain position. Mind you, you're not making any money during that time,
Mm,
and you're also spending money, right? And so there's a good statistic. I think 36% of all student loan borrowers get no degree. So imagine getting the
wow.
loan, but you're getting no degree, and you still have to pay for the loan,
Mm,
and you don't have the degree. So that's
yeah,
also a risk, right?
right.
Another risk is you get a degree that's worth nothing, right? And you'll find out out there that a lot of employers, yeah, they'll care about the degree, but they don't really care about what you studied. They just care like, hey, are you able to endure hardship and like show
Mhm.
up for something that's challenging, what's difficult, right? With entrepreneur, it's a little entrepreneurship, it's a little different. You have to not have an idea, and you have to be willing to invest in that idea.
Mm,
So that
mhm.
might take capital, and that might take money. That might take you borrowing money from a bank. That might be borrowing money from relatives and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go in on this idea. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm not sure if it's going to pay out, right?" I have a client. He went all in on a stretch lab. I'm not sure you know what a stretch lab
Yes.
is.
Uh-huh.
Spent $300,000, liquidated his 401k, saved all this money. Overhead is, I think, anywhere from 20 to $25,000 a month because he's employing, he's got the brick and mortar.
Hmm.
Um, he says he won't be in the positive for a couple years, but
Wow.
that's taking a huge risk.
Yes.
Now there's other type of opportunities out there that don't require so much financial risk, right? Getting a professional license, right? Becoming an agent in some type of insurance or going into real estate.
Right.
A lot of these places, they allow you to build an agency and you don't have to employ because a lot of the people you, let's say, quote unquote, bring on board are going to be 1099 independent contractors,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
when you're thinking about taking a risk, look at three things. So you're looking at upfront costs,
Mhm.
overhead, and cash flow, right? So you have to see, well, how much does it cost to get started, right? What is my monthly or yearly overhead, and what's the cash flow? And if it makes sense, perfect, take the risk. By the way, a
Right.
lot of entrepreneurial businesses
Mhm.
don't require you to quit your 9 to 5 in order to make
Right.
money.
Yeah.
So while you're working your job, build something on the side. So eventually, what you built can replace your 9 to 5, right?
Yes.
So that's what I would say when it comes to taking a risk. You can mitigate the risk, you can reduce the risk, but at the end of the day, everything carries risk.
It's true. And I love that thought process. I just met someone the other day. She's a teacher, and yet she was, had her little food truck selling coffee. And I was like, "This is your full time?" She's like, "No, I told my friend, hey, we should start a coffee truck." And her friend said, "Sure, let's do it." And I think nothing gained, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? You kind of get
Mhm.
out there, you risk, maybe not being able to do your business, gosh, but if you don't try, isn't that what we're in life for? To try,
Right,
to new things,
right, right.
do new things,
Mm.
to have passion. So I love that. Everything has a risk. What are some of the rewards about being an entrepreneur?
Great question. Well, let's talk about, well, let's say, because I was on the traditional route too. I remember someone saying to me, and it struck me. He said, Roger, you can have a degree. By the way, I have like 3 degrees. You can get those 3 degrees, but you cannot pass down your degrees to your kids,
Mm,
right? You can get a
good point.
job, but you can't pass down the job to your child, right? Um, there's a lot of things you can't pass down when you go to the traditional route, but when it comes to running or owning your own business, you can actually pass that down to your kids. So you can pass down businesses, you can pass down wealth, you can pass down knowledge, but you can't pass down a degree. So
Oh,
rewards of entrepreneurship. unlimited income potential. You know, if you were taught, as a young child, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up versus, hey, what do you want your lifestyle to look like? Right? You will make different choices, right? Because you can say if you say, "Hey, I want to be a doctor," but I've told you, "Hey, being a doctor requires you, you're in school for 9 to 10 years, and then you not see your family, you working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, you having 3 pagers on your belt, you always on call."
Yeah.
Maybe you would think differently. What if you said, "Hey, what do you want your lifestyle to look like? Do you want to be free? Do you want to travel wherever you want to go? Do you want to spend money the way you want to spend money? Do you want people telling you where you can live, where you can't live?" No,
Mm,
right? So as as an entrepreneur, there's unlimited income potential, ownership, meaning you can pass down that wealth, you can pass down that knowledge, you can pass down those assets, you can build a legacy. Gosh, I don't have a boss. Well, the closest thing I do have a boss. I would say my wife, right? So I can't, when it comes to making decisions, we make it together. But
mm,
I just remember as and working in healthcare, I'd have to trade my Christmases, right? So every other Christmas I had to work. Every other Thanksgiving I had to work,
yeah.
right? And then if I had someone passing away in my family, if it wasn't quote unquote an immediate family member, I
Mm,
couldn't go get the day off to take care of or to be there to mourn, and let's say it was my kid's second or third or fourth birthday. Man, I would miss birthdays, and I would ask people like, "Hey, do you mind me switching and this and that?" And having to do that was always challenging. Now today, I don't like we can celebrate our kid's birthday whenever, I could take my wife on a date in the middle of the day and which I love. I love going out in the middle of the day because there's no one there. Right? You're not you're not scrounging for reservations and one of the benefits we have too is that we homeschool. So we're not living on majority of Americans' time where, hey, you're fighting for that 1 week or 2 weeks where everybody's on spring break or everybody's on winter break, and now you're at Disneyland or Disney World and it is crowded, right? Uh,
right.
like we can go on school days and it is
Yeah.
just there's no lines, which is awesome, right?
Yeah.
So those are a couple words of being an entrepreneur. Like, is it easy? No, but is it worth it? Very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I love that flexibility, right? Best to go to Disneyland when it's empty. You don't have to wait in the long lines and just the flexibility of when you want to work and when you don't want to work. Being an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be motivated and you're able to kind of do your own schedule. And I love also, I was thinking about what you said with your kids, you can't pass it down. Like, your
Mhm.
dad or your rich uncle said, you're like, oh, we have money. And he's like, no, I have money. You don't have any money. But you are able to pass down your business to your kids,
Mhm.
and it
Right,
really gives them
right.
a leg up and a head start in life. So that's amazing. You talked a little bit about different franchises, and I think of ones like what, McDonald's and Subway. There's different real estate franchises, maybe like Century 21, just to name a couple. But a lot of
Yeah.
people think these are safer ways to come into business and be an entrepreneur. Would you say that's true?
Great question. Franchises, I would say, depending on the business model, like franchises are basically a proven system. They work, right? You just have to be willing to pay the costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So with owning a franchise, there's high startup costs, there's ongoing fees, there's royalties, location matters, So if you open up McDonald's, you open up a Subway, you open up a Remax, location really, really
Mm-hmm.
matters. And if you're
Yeah.
not willing to pay the price to be in that area, it might be a hit or miss, right? Another thing about buying a franchise, you have to go through the process. You have to learn how to hire. You have to learn how to fire. You have to learn how to cook the
Mm-hmm.
fries. You have to do the burgers because one of the
Yeah.
things about entrepreneurship is there's no guarantee you're gonna have healthy employees all the time. So if someone calls in sick, you're gonna have to be the one manning the register. You're gonna be the one manning the fries and the burgers and whatnot. So yes, franchises are awesome. They're great because it is a proven system. It's just you have to work in the factor of, well, how much is it going to cost me up front? Do
Mm.
I have 1 million laying around? Do I have 2 million
Right.
laying around? I think Chick-fil-A has one of the lowest startup costs, but they traded in saying, hey, you have to work for at least 10 years to in
Mm.
order
Wow.
to own the franchise, right? So it just really depends. Now, let's say you get into that cash flow phrase or phase where you're actually making more money than you're taking in. Awesome, 'cause that's what we're looking for, right? You don't want to be in debt. You don't want to be having your employees making more than you. But that's what it will feel like those first couple of years when you
Yeah.
start a franchise, right? So yeah, and you have to think about the rent, you have to think about the payroll, you have to think about a lot of different things. But it is a turnkey system, meaning, hey, here is the business on a platter, pay us up front, work it a little bit, and give yourself 5 to 10 years, and this will pay off, right? So you just got to be willing to pay the costs.
I was thinking about your friend with the stretch lab, right? He's probably working a ton of hours. Is he at a 40-hour week? Likely not, right? And not
Hmm.
really turning a profit. And so it is challenging. You do have to work really hard. Like you said, 10 years. That's a long time to kind of wait to have your own business. And so I think about a lot of people think about, well, I can't be an entrepreneur because I have to have a major degree. I have to go to the Warner School of Business. I've got to be highly educated. But let's talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur and where does education come in? I know a lot of people um, are really dealing with student loan debt,
Yeah.
and so where does education come in, even in these types of businesses?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, you do have to understand your product, right? You have to know it in and out, right? If you're going to sell something, and that's what, businesses really do. They sell a product, they sell a service. You have to know it in and out, right? Now, the biggest investment I would say as an entrepreneur is going to be in yourself, right? So
Mhm.
you're going to have to set yourself apart, and the way you do it is I heard this recently that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It really isn't, right?
Right.
But there's a version of yourself that it is for,
Mm.
right? There is a version of yourself, meaning if you are willing to change, if you're willing to do what it takes, then it is for you, right? So when it comes to entrepreneurship, you have to ask yourself, well, what kind of education do I need in order to excel myself, right?
Mm.
I have a buddy, he owns a clothing company. So he threw himself into the fashion industry, learned a lot about it, learned the ins and outs, the ebbs and flows, the upfront costs. He was in screen tea making, and he bought all the prints and this, that. And today he's a very, very successful entrepreneur. It's a very, very cutthroat industry, but he invested. He wanted to learn more about it. One of the things you could do as an entrepreneur, if you really want to run a business, is become an employee of the business you want to build,
Huh. Mhm.
right? So let's say you do want to own a franchise, or you want to run a burger spot. Be an employee. Watch him, observe him. I mean, that's what Ray Kroc did when he
Yeah.
looked at McDonald's. He literally went into the kitchen, looked around, was like, yeah, I think I could do this. This is awesome. So almost like an employee, yes, you're getting paid, but you're almost like you're paid intern, but you have to be inquisitive. You have to learn. You have to know, like, well, how does this work? What's your cash flow? When does payroll happen? What happens when when there's a grievance and this and that. So a
Yeah.
lot of the education comes from being willing to learn when there's a problem. Well, how do I solve this problem, right?
Mhm.
And the more problems you solve, the more wealthy you become. I heard this recently, find a problem that everybody has, find a solution for it, and you will be wealthy,
Yeah,
right?
for
So
sure.
that's what I would say. Now, in our industry, financial services, what I love about us is it's served to you. It's like you can get a license, you can literally go study for a couple of days, go get a license. In your state, it might be 100, it might be 300, $400.
Mhm.
That's your upfront cost. That's your education. Every 2 years, you got to do your CEs and continue education. And then we have leadership development that develops you. Because if you want to build a team, awesome. If you don't want to build a team, that's awesome too. We can help you just become a financial professional. I think the upkeep on your license is maybe like 500 to $1,000 a year versus $20,000 a month when you own a
Yeah.
franchise or building a business. So the risks are low, the barrier to entry is low, but the income and the outcome, the potential is really, really high, right? So I hope that makes sense when it comes to education. You really want to
Yeah.
invest in yourself, read books and
Mhm.
develop this more than anything else.
Yeah, and I was just telling my sons that, you always have to educate yourself. I think there's a lot of people who've done really well in the world just by educating themselves. If you don't know something, you can learn anything. You just got to
Mhm.
put the energy and the effort in. And so I think even with our business, it's kind of amazing. You can go in and get your license. And there's so much education. There's so many people willing to help you, hold your hand at times, and kind of lead you in a good situation. So I wanted to ask you just about, different people consider entrepreneurship and being their own boss. What are some of the opportunities that we even have with our own firm?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, I like to call it half-time, part-time, or full-time. What I love about our industry is our business model allows folks to make an extra 500 to $1,000 a month, right? So let's say they just love helping people, they love serving people, but their life is very demanding. They work a
Mm-hmm.
full-time job, or let's say they have children, they're trying to build their home. Well, hey, do this on the side. All right, I call it your spare time. So, when you're getting your license, you learn about our services, you learn about how to sit down with families, you learn how to write an application. You could do that in your spare time, right?
Right.
And then let's say you really, really do want to transition into making this full time, right? You want to scale down your hours at your job, put in more hours here, which you don't necessarily have to leave your job to do this,
Mhm.
right? You could do it simultaneously. Um, and then there's full time, meaning like, yeah, you really want to become senior. You want to run the show. You want to, hold meetings and training, and you love serving your clients, and you love serving your agents. You can do that too, right? That will obviously require more time, more investment, and more investment in yourself. And we have that all here, right? So when it comes to positions, I wouldn't say like, all right, here's an HR position, here's a corporate position, here's the engineering department. It's just deciding, well, how much do you want to get out of it? So the
Right.
more you put in, the more you get out of it, right? And it really is in correlation to the time and effort you put in. All right, the more, like, for instance, if you want to have a harvest, you better plant a lot of seeds. I mean, you got to put more time and effort into planting and watering, right? You can't expect to have a huge harvest when you only planted one seed or two seeds or three seeds, right? The more you plant, the more you water, the bigger the harvest, right?
Mhm.
So when it comes to positions that are available, you have your spare time, you have your part-time, and then you have your all-in. The folks like me who decide, you know what, I want to do this for a living. I want to make a career out of it. I want to help people. I love seeing people go from, zero to hero, and you could do it for yourself, and then you can also do it for others. So the question I would have for people, hey, currently, um, are you building your dream? Or are you building someone else's dream?
Yeah,
Right. And so
for
in
sure.
entrepreneurship, you have the opportunity to build your own dream and help others do the same.
Mhm. That's awesome. And I love like what you said earlier. You don't have to wait, 10 years to make money. You could make
Mhm.
money right away, but you're doing it. You're learning, you're growing, you're building your business slowly until that is your full time. And so I think that being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of different levels. But what I love about our agency is that you're not doing it alone. There's
Mhm.
different tips, there's different ways that you can learn to study and get your license. And then we kind of walk you through. Again, it's the people business. So if you're a people person, this is a great option for you. You don't have to wait to, find a big house to sell. You just sit with a client, talk to them, help them, you know, and it's not just even about being profitable. It's just so encouraging to see people succeed. And I really love just that you've been able to do that. I was thinking, you worked at what did you say, three hospitals?
Two hospitals
Two
at once.
hospitals. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that somebody would think, here's Roger, super successful. He's got his degree. He's working at two hospitals. He's doing well, right? But so what was the missing thing for you in that is what, your family time, or what would you say was missing in your life at that point?
Yeah, good question. Well, I would say this. You don't know what you're missing until you taste it.
Mm,
Right? You don't know what you're missing out until you taste it. And I remember getting a message from one of my mentors when I was just starting this business. And he said, texted me, and he was kind of up there in income, and he's a very, very brilliant guy, smart guy. And he said, hey, me and so are gonna go out for lunch. Can you come through? And here I am at my job. I'm like, it's the middle of the day. I'm like, I want to go so bad. I want to go, and the wheels in my head were turning. I was like, well, if I tell my coworkers this, they can take over my load, and I could do this, and then at the end of it, it's like I spent more time thinking about how to get it done that I just missed the lunch altogether.
mm,
You know,
mhm,
and then not to mention, there's years that you don't get back as a
mhm,
kid, there's or as for your children.
mhm,
I just we attended this birthday party recently, and parents, they work full time. Actually, what the dad works overseas and the mom works a lot as well. And they have a nanny, right? They have a nanny to take care of their kid, and they just celebrated their first year the 1 year birthday party for their child. And what saddened me is the child was stuck to the nanny,
mm,
right?
mhm.
And anytime mom or dad wanted to hold her, she would just cry hysterically. And she's one, right? And it just broke my heart. And then Val reminded me, is like, that used to be you.
Mm,
That used to be you. You know, Kids would want to spend all the time with mom because that's who they spent with. They spent time with her all the time. And then
yeah.
they used to call me grandpa on my days off because I would be sleeping all the time. I was
Mm,
always exhausted. I was always tired. Everything has a cost, right? So whether you have a job, my cost was time with my family, time with my kids.
mhm.
I watched Jameson and Maddie grow up on FaceTime with Jeremiah and Summer. I didn't miss a day with them.
Wow.
Don't miss a day. I
Oh,
didn't miss a day with him, and it shows. Like, it's evident. Like, I am so close to Summer. I am so close to Jeremiah. We do like, my life is incomplete without them, and being with them is a reminder. Like, man, I missed 7, 8 years with Jameson and Maddie.
yeah. Hmm.
Right. Now I don't get to miss their teenage years. I'm with them now, so
Oh
I
boy.
get that part. It's a fun time,
Yeah.
but we're all learning together,
Hmm.
and
It's
since we
amazing.
homeschool the kids, we're with one another a lot,
Hmm.
and we'll see what this is going to look like for them in the next 5 to 10 years, what kind of kids, what kind of adults are going to be in society and whatnot. But I would say that, right? Love is spelled Time with a child. And if you're rich when you can give as much time to your kids,
Yeah.
right? They won't remember the gifts. They won't remember, the things you bought them, but they will remember the time you spent with them. And building this business to have that time with them is probably the most rewarding thing I could ever experience.
Absolutely. And I love just in our industry, being an entrepreneur, you with spending time with your kids while they're young, that is so important. And me, as I'm having elderly parents, you have that time to spend with them. If you're a stay-at-home mom or a working mom, eventually you work hard. So this is your full time and you have that freedom. And you and your wife have really put in a lot of energy to be able to have that freedom, to be able to be there. And you guys do so many things. I just want to ask you one last thing. What is it in this business that you, besides you're spending time with your family, that you've been able to do that you're like, I never thought that I would get to do this. I'm so grateful that I do.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Goodness, there's a lot. I'll say this, when it comes to money, right? There was times where, like Val and I remember in our college days, we would go to an amusement park and we would have to wait in the 2.5 hour lines. And I remember going to Disney World with our kids and we were just sitting in this line for like, oh my gosh, it's been an hour. And my wife looked online, she's like, hey, there's a fast pass we could buy. And I looked at it, I was like, never in a million years that we would buy this fast pass because the fast pass would cost just as much as the ticket. And then Val said, "Hey, we have the money. Let's do it." Right. So in the line, right? I think this was in the turnstile at Universal. Like we were going from one amusement park to another amusement park. This is in Orlando, Florida. And we just bought the fast pass and we just got out of line and then we went to the fast pass line. And
That's cool.
good. It was the most amazing experience, right? Because you were walking, you were speeding through the queue, and it was so incredible. It was so fun. Another thing is, if you get there, get to a level in business where you're reaching certain heights, they're rewarded with free trips. Like my wife and I, we've been to Hawaii several times, we've been to Mexico several times, right? All expense paid, and all-inclusive resorts. So it's a fun deal not having to pay for these trips because you work so hard that you get to earn
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. But I would say one thing that has been one of the most rewarding experiences is just seeing people's lives change. You
Hmm.
know, all right, if you're thinking about building a business, build people, right? And by building people, you change the way they think. You start pouring belief into them. You start helping them think differently and start thinking bigger. And to see someone make their first paycheck as an entrepreneur versus working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, it's
Yeah.
probably one of the most rewarding things because it plants a seed saying, "Hey, I could do this too." Right? My life could be different.
Hmm.
So, hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Roger, for sharing it. It's fun. We didn't get to talk as much last time, so it's really fun just to kind of see your story and hear your experience. And, I know a
Mhm.
lot of us are wondering, how do I do that too, right? How do I become an entrepreneur? If you want any information, we're definitely there to help you. And whether you're open to work or you're open for business, open your own business, jump outside of your comfort zone and start something new. So I just really appreciate you all being here today. My information will be in the comments. Let's hop on a Zoom and talk how we can get you to this amazing journey. So thanks everybody for being here and see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Shanna.
Thank you, Roger.